Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to dive headfirst into the manga again, but before I do, I want to clarify a few things. Since my Berserk videos have been getting a bit more views, I feel like I need to reiterate a couple of things I did in the early videos. I explained in the very first intro video, but in case you haven't seen that one, here's a little bit of info. I am not, nor do I claim to be, a Berserk expert. It's only been about a year since I became invested in the series. I watched the anime trilogy of movies, then the 97 series, then I began collecting the manga. I am not someone who thinks that I have an ultimate understanding or knowledge of the material in its completion. Also, I'm trying to draw out my enjoyment for as long as possible, so I'm only reading about a volume a week. That way I can kind of keep it going and keep my enjoyment of Berserk lasting for as long as I can. So I'm not yet caught up to the current chapters. Also, when making these videos, I try to do a couple of specific things. One is to only explain and analyze what's happening based on the context of what's been presented so far. Meaning I am avoiding using examples from upcoming story or character arcs to help explain what's happening currently. I'm going through this as if it's the first time reading it. That's why when I did the Black Swordsman arc, I didn't say much because I was actively trying not to spoil what's ahead. Okay. And number two, I am sharing theories and ideas going along that may not turn out to be correct. I am basing my opinions on what's been presented in the story so far and sharing where I think they may go or theories of characters' pasts and what have you. These videos are for fun and just to share my love of the story as a fan. They are by no means meant to be 100% accurate, a be-all, end-all of what Berserk is. So if you enjoy the way I do the videos, thank you. And if you don't, then my content may not be for you. But there are plenty of great Berserk videos on YouTube, so I will not be offended if you choose to watch other people. So I hope that little explanation makes sense and shines a little bit more light on my process of trying to make these videos. So with that all out of the way, let's continue. The moth-like giant apostle confronts Guts and claims that she is indeed an elf. Puck immediately scoffs at this, but Guts doesn't really care either way. He just wants to kill her. As her little elf minions surround her, they chant for her to kill Guts because he's just a mean grown-up. And with Puck's empathetic abilities, he is able to sense or feel a piece of the truth, that her elf bug minions feel like that of human children. The apostle overhears Puck and calls him a Peacoff. That name triggers something in Jill, who is watching the battle. More on that in a moment. As the apostle swoops down for an attack, Jill steps in front of Guts, calling the apostle Rosine and asking her to stop. The apostle stops her assault and does indeed fly off after hearing that from Jill. As we've seen before, apostles do tend to hang on to many of their human tendencies. So Jill recognizing the apostle and the apostle recognizing her back will become very important. As the apostle and her minions vacate, the scared townspeople come out yelling at Guts for using the small boy as bait, to which Guts points out that none of them even bothered to try to save the boy. They stayed scared inside, and if we know anything about Guts now as the Black Swordsman, he can't stand weakness, calling people once before ants beneath his feet. But then, in the burning remains of the barn Guts set on fire, we see that all of the bodies of the little insect creatures have changed back into the bodies of children upon their death. A mass of burning child bodies is now in the center of town, for which Guts is responsible. And we know that the apostle, now named Rosine, has been abducting the children, and apparently this is what the abductions have been for, to turn them into her little minions. Guts decides to take a knife up to Jill and use her as a means to escape the angry townspeople. As they pass through, Jill sees her drunkard father making eye contact only for a moment before he turns away. For all his stories of bravery, he turns a blind eye to Jill being abducted, his own daughter. Jill isn't in any real danger, but he wouldn't know that for sure. Instead, he just decides to be scared. When they reach the outskirts of town, Guts lets her go, and then shuffles Puck over her so some elf dust can heal her neck. Jill tries to explain that the apostle is her friend that went missing long ago, and Guts tells her to go back home and not to follow him. He plans to kill this creature, and says that this is not a kiddie game. There's always been a big difference with the way adults and kids see the world generally. Kids tend to be much more optimistic, seeing the world as full of possibilities and magic. Stuck in one place, they imagine what it would be like beyond their little town. A new world of amazement awaits them. Adults, on the other hand, after having many of their dreams completely beaten out of them over time and experiencing more and more tragedy, have a much more cynical view. They know wherever you go it will always be the same. The idea of magic is gone from their eyes. Guts, still bleeding and slightly poisoned from his encounter with Rosine, refuses Puck's healing power and tells him one last time to stop following him. He throws Puck down and then travels off by himself. Guts continues to throw everything away in his travels. He's stripping himself of what makes him human in a way. He wants nothing around him so that he can just be a swirling mass of rage and revenge. He uses some remedies to try to heal himself up for the night, but then feels his brand start to bleed. You just see the tiredness in this man's eyes, and it's kind of heartbreaking. Before him in the campfire, a vision of his own demon child appears, haunting him, and with it has brought the recently dead souls of all the children Guts inadvertently killed when they were demons. They all look like they're crying out. So many things here to mess with Guts' mind. Guilt that he killed them even though it was inevitable, a reminder of his own child lost, and the rage that's going through him once again, being forced to strike them all down. And strike them down he does, putting all his feelings to the back of his mind and unleashing that black swordsman grin. Jill, who has been following him, now accompanied by Puck, sees his onslaught, and Guts almost slashes her as well until he realizes that she's there. He grabs her and jumps off the mountain, away from the fiery children spirits. Then as day breaks, Guts asks Jill to tell him who or what Peacoff is, the word that Rosine had used to call Puck, and Jill shares the story. It's a fable of the town, that a boy named Peacoff had pointed ears and red eyes. Because of this, he was always mocked and bullied by other children. Believing his parents not really to be his, and feeling different from everyone around him, he ran into the forest where adults said never to go, to find the land of the elves. He found them, but they had wings, and he did not. He was still different, and he was informed that as an infant, his mother and father brought him here, asking the elves for help as the baby was on the verge of death. The elves used magic to help the child, but his appearance was changed because of this. Peacoff then ran back to the village, but when he got there, 100 years had passed. His village and everyone he knew was gone. This sad little story, I believe, has way more importance than meets the eye. The idea of reaching a place where time moves differently than the reality around it, where you could enter in one point of time and exit nearly 100 years had passed. At some point on Guts' journey, this is bound to happen, and I can imagine the results will not be good. Until then, Jill explains that her childhood friend Rosine loved this story and felt like her herself was an outcast just like Peacoff. And who else as a child could relate to similar things? That feeling of being bullied and picked on and never feeling like part of the community around you? Jill continues on about Rosine, explaining that she would always be playing in the woods and find and collect little things that she would come across, including a small egg-shaped object with a face on it. But apparently Rosine always stayed outside because she was afraid of going home, abusive parents and bruises that would show up on her. Also, changing the story of Peacoff in her mind so that he really was an elf and lived happily ever after once he reached the elf place. Once again, this is hopeful optimism of kids versus the harsh reality of adulthood. One night, Rosine said goodbye to Jill and told her she was going off to the Misty Valley to be with the elves. She left, and not long after her parents disappeared as well, and so did the egg-shaped object. So Puck just pops up out of Guts' bag with the Bailey he's been carrying since facing the Count and is like, "Ooh, did it look like this?" Puck has also named the Bailet Bechi for some reason, I guess. Guts has no filter and just brutally explains the truth to Jill, that what Rosine had was one of the Bailets, and she used it to summon the angels for power in exchange for a sacrifice, which would be her parents. He tells her once again not to follow him and leaves her and Puck behind. Jill struggles with this realization, a bit of coming of age. But before she can deal with it much, Rosine herself flies down to greet her. Rosine embraces her and is happy to see her. She changes her appearance to look more human and happily tells Jill that this is the real her and to come with her to the Misty Valley of Elves. Rosine appears to be full of joy and wonder, the perfect embodiment of childhood optimism, creating her own reality, but more so than that, it's more evidence that even after becoming an apostle, you still retain who you are. She begins to pick up Jill to take her, but then Guts leaps out of nowhere, coming down to hack Rosine to pieces. She dodges at the last moment, Guts only managing to cut off a piece of her wing. She wails and her face transforms back into the moth-like creature. Jill tells her not to hurt Guts, and Rosine flies off high in the sky where Guts cannot follow. Puck asks Guts if he planned to hit Jill as well during that swing, and Guts says that he probably would have. So Puck gets angry at Guts and leaves to follow Jill and Rosine, and Guts wonders if he did hold back for Jill's sake. Meanwhile, Above the trees, Rosine and Jill fly, noticing the beauty of how things look from up here, filled with the freedom of childhood wonder. Rosine tells Jill that she can fly all she wants, if she becomes one of them. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I appreciate all the likes and comments that I get on these videos. Let me know your thoughts down below about Rosine and Jill and the elves of the Misty Valley and the Peacoff story. Tell me what you think about them and if you think they're going to play a part moving forward. So thanks a lot, guys. Give us a thumbs up. Talk to you next time.